The digital cursor pulsed on the stark white document, a mocking beacon in the oppressive silence of my small apartment. 17 years of deliberate invisibility, of forced quiet, weighed on me like a physical burden. My hands trembled not from fear, not yet, but from a familiar physiological response I'd learned to recognize, a visceral tremor that preceded the return of a certain kind of hunger. It had been 3 days since my last proper meal, since I had last tried to satiate what gnawed at me. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the stale apartment air doing little to steady my nerves, and began to type. My name is Elias Thorne. What I am about to share will sound impossible, a deranged delusion, but I swear on the faded memory of the man I once was, every single word is true. Before I fully become something I can no longer control, something far more terrible than any mindless beast, I need to expose what they did. What Project Chimera turned us into the words once started flowed with a surprising, almost desperate ease. I was 45 now, though my reflection showed a man far older than his years, yet paradoxically, also unnaturally preserved. Weathered lines creased a face that bore the marks of chronic insomnia, dark circles beneath eyes that had seen too much and still refused to close for long. The nightmares were an insistent, relentless torment, memories too vivid, too visceral to escape. It all began in 2007. I was a decorated operative, 28 years old, at the peak of a promising military career. The transfer order came without warning, cryptic in its brevity, mentioning only a specialized training initiative requiring my unique qualifications. 4 other soldiers received identical directives. Captain Jerk Vance, a stoic, natural leader from Special Reconnaissance. Sergeant Cale Novick, a charismatic but volatile demolitions expert. Master Sergeant Ben Carter, a quiet, rock-solid sniper. And Specialist Finn O'Malley, a keen-eyed analyst with an uncanny knack for detail. We were strangers, plucked from different units and disparate backgrounds, but we shared a common profile. Peak physical condition, exemplary service records, and crucially, no immediate family connections that might complicate our sudden disappearance. They flew us to a remote, undisclosed facility nestled deep within the Canadian Arctic, miles from the nearest semblance of civilization. The helicopter ride from a staging base in Iqaluit stretched for 3 grueling hours over an endless, frozen wilderness. The stark landscape making it painfully clear how utterly isolated we would be. General Richter, a man whose presence filled a room with an almost palpable chill, greeted us upon arrival. Tall, with steely gray hair and cold, unblinking eyes that seemed to miss nothing, he surveyed us with an unnerving intensity. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that echoed in the facility's vast main briefing room, "consider yourselves privileged. You have been selected for Project Chimera, a program that will not merely redefine warfare in the 21st century, but utterly transcend it." He paced slowly before us, his polished boots silent on the concrete floor. "What transpires here remains classified at the highest possible level. You will not discuss your experiences with anyone outside this facility, not even among yourselves, beyond designated operational areas. Discretion is paramount, absolute discretion." Jerk Vance, ever the leader, raised a hand. "Sir, with respect, what precisely will we be doing here?" Richter's mouth twitched, a faint, almost imperceptible movement that might have been a smile. "Advancing your capabilities, Captain, beyond anything currently conceived. If successful, you will return to service with career trajectories many would quite literally kill for. Any man incapable of maintaining absolute discretion should speak now. There is still time to return to your regular duties, with no questions asked, no repercussions." None of us spoke. We were soldiers, hardened professionals. Following orders was ingrained in our very being. The promise of unparalleled advancement, of pushing the boundaries of human potential, was merely an added, tantalizing bonus. The initial 3 weeks consisted of intensive baseline testing, a relentless battery of examinations designed to map every facet of our existing capabilities. Physical endurance, cognitive processing, stress response, pain tolerance, they pushed us to our limits and beyond. Blood draws became a daily ritual, morning and evening, followed by endless questionnaires and psychological evaluations. We trained together, ate together, even slept in adjacent quarters. Despite our diverse backgrounds, a strained but easy camaraderie formed through shared hardship and the unspoken anticipation of what was to come. Kale Novak was the most sociable, always ready with a dark joke to break the tension. Jerk Vance naturally fell into the leadership role, his calm, measured approach earning our respect without effort. Ben Carter was the quiet workhorse, dependable and steady, his movements precise and economical. Finn O'Malley was perceptive, picking up on details others missed, a silent observer with a quick, incisive mind. And me. I was the cautious one, always analyzing, always looking for angles, for exits, for the unseen variables. My instincts, honed by years of combat, screamed for me to remain vigilant. Dr. Alastair Finch oversaw our medical evaluations. He was a gaunt man with disheveled brown hair and eyes that burned with a disturbingly intense scientific fervor. "Your baseline performances are exceptional," he told us one evening as we gathered in his stark, sterile lab. He paused, his gaze sweeping over each of us, lingering slightly on Novak. "But tomorrow, gentlemen, we begin the real work, the work that will elevate you beyond the merely exceptional." He unveiled a heavy, insulated case, its latches clicking open with an almost theatrical flourish. Inside, nestled in individual foam cutouts, lay 5 syringes, each filled with a viscous, amber liquid that seemed to shimmer under the harsh fluorescent lights, almost alive. "This," he announced, his voice barely concealing a tremor of poorly suppressed pride, "is the ether strain. More precisely, ether alpha. It will revolutionize human performance, enhancing your natural capabilities beyond current human limitations, beyond what was ever thought possible." I remember the silence that followed, the way we all stared at those syringes. Enhancement wasn't new to military discussions. It was a theoretical holy grail. But something about the zealous gleam in Dr. Finch's eyes, the almost manic energy in his posture, sent a chilling premonition down my spine. "Side effects?" I asked, my voice cutting through the thick silence. "Minor and temporary," he replied, perhaps a little too quickly. "Fever, muscle pain, increased metabolic rate, vivid sensory experiences. All expected responses as your physiologies adapt, nothing to be concerned about." The consent forms came next. Dozens of pages of dense scientific jargon and intricate legal clauses. I read mine with far more care than the others, noting vague, unsettling phrases about unforeseen physiological adaptations, cognitive recalibration, and even existential reorientation. My pen hovered over the signature line, a flicker of doubt, a primal warning urging me to reconsider. Having second thoughts, Kale Novak grinned from across the table, his signature already a bold flourish on his form. "Afraid you won't keep up with the rest of us." The others had already signed, their expressions a mix of eagerness and grim determination. Jerk Vance gave me a reassuring nod, his gaze steady. "We're in this together, Elias." Against my better judgment, I signed. A decision that has haunted me, every waking moment, every tortured dream, for 17 years. The first injection happened the next morning. We sat in a row of medical chairs, the air thick with antiseptic and a nervous anticipation. Dr. Finch, his movements precise, almost ritualistic, administered the serum one by one. When it was my turn, the needle slid into my vein with practiced, almost delicate precision. The amber liquid, cold at first, entered my bloodstream, and immediately I felt it. A burning sensation, searing and agonizing, spreading from my arm through my chest, electrifying every nerve ending, every fiber of my being. "Jesus!" Ben Carter gasped from 2 seats down, gripping the armrests of his chair, his knuckles white, the pain intensified, muscles contracting violently, vision blurring to a kaleidoscope of agonizing light. I bit down on my lip until I tasted blood, a desperate attempt to ground myself, determined not to scream. Then, as suddenly as it began, the pain transformed into something else entirely. A wave of indescribable euphoria washed through my system, a rush of pure, unadulterated power. My senses sharpened dramatically, violently. I could hear the rhythmic thrum of everyone's heartbeats in the room, the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. The antiseptic scent on Dr. Finch's hands was overwhelming, and I could see every single dust particle dancing in the sunbeams slanting through the high window. "Holy," Finn O'Malley whispered, his voice hushed with awe. "I feel incredible." The changes accumulated rapidly over the following days. We could lift twice our previous maximums without strain. I ran 20 miles on the indoor track without the slightest hint of fatigue, my lungs burning with exhilaration, not exhaustion. Kale Novak shattered the facility's shooting range record, hitting targets at distances that should have been impossible without a scope. his movements fluid and deadly. In the cafeteria one evening, 5 days after the first injection, we celebrated our transformation. Jerk Vance raised his water glass, a rare smile gracing his lips. "To Project Chimera," he toasted, "making gods of mere mortals." "I can't wait to see what we'll be capable of in another week," Ben Carter added, his eyes bright with excitement. I smiled and toasted with them, forcing enthusiasm, but something felt profoundly wrong beneath the surface. The way Dr. Finch documented our progress with an almost obsessive detail, the hushed, heated arguments I'd overheard between him and General Richter while walking past Richter's office. "The molecular binding is still unstable," Finch had insisted, his voice tight. "We need more time before increasing the dosage." "Washington wants results, doctor, not excuses," Richter had replied, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. At night, I'd lie awake, my enhanced hearing making sleep impossible, listening to Cale Novick pacing endlessly in his room next door. Sometimes, he muttered to himself, words I couldn't quite make out despite my amplified senses. Once, I distinctly heard him hammering on his wall with what sounded like his bare fist, over and over, until the concrete cracked with sickening finality. The pounding from Novik's room eventually stopped that night, but my unease continued to grow. I lay awake until dawn, straining my senses for any further disturbances, my new hyper-awareness making true rest elusive. When the facility lights automatically brightened at 600, I was already dressed and wading 6 weeks into Project Chimera. Our physical transformations had accelerated beyond anything we'd imagined. The morning testing routine had become as ingrained as breathing, weight assessment, reflexes, cognitive processing, and always the blood draws. Every 8 hours, like clockwork, Dr. Finch or one of his assistants would extract vials of our blood for analysis. "Another day, another pint," I joked weakly as a technician slid the needle into my vein with practiced, almost clinical efficiency. The young man didn't respond. None of them ever did. The research staff maintained a professional distance that had once seemed normal, but now felt deliberate, almost as if they were afraid of us. Our training intensified as Dr. Finch pushed us to test new capabilities. The regular exercise equipment had been replaced with reinforced versions after Ben Carter bent a titanium barbell last week. This morning, I completed 100 pull-ups without breaking a sweat before moving to the treadmill where I ran at nearly 60 miles per hour for almost an hour. But Cale Novick was something else entirely. He entered the gym late, his eyes fixed straight ahead, pupils so dilated his irises were nearly invisible. When he stepped onto the treadmill, he cranked it to maximum speed and ran for 3 straight hours, no water breaks, no visible fatigue. General Richter stood watching him, an undisguised pride on his face, while Dr. Finch scribbled notes furiously on his tablet. "Remarkable," I overheard Richter say. "Novik's adaptation rate exceeds all projections." "Yes, though there are anomalies in his latest blood work that warrant," Dr. Finch began, a note of concern in his voice. "Numbers on paper, Doctor," Richter interrupted, gesturing toward Novik with an approving nod. "Look at him, that's the future of warfare right there." During afternoon sparring, we rotated partners as usual. When my turn with Cale came, I approached him cautiously. In his place stood something else. His muscles had grown disproportionate to his frame, veins pulsing visibly beneath his skin like thick cords. "Ready, Thorn?" Cale's voice had deepened to a guttural rasp, alien and chilling. I barely had time to nod before he launched himself at me with frightening, impossible speed. I dodged his first strike by mere millimeters, feeling the air displace next to my ear. His second connected with my ribs, sending me sliding across the mat despite my own enhanced durability. "Point," called the supervising officer. We reset positions. This time I managed to block his initial assault and counter with a sweep that would have taken down any normal opponent. Cale merely absorbed the impact and grabbed my arm, twisting until I had to tap out, the joint groaning under the pressure. When Ben Carter took my place against Cale, I expected the usual controlled demonstration of technique. Instead, Cale moved with unexpected savage brutality. Ben blocked the first 2 strikes but missed the third, a vicious uppercut that sent him sprawling. Before anyone could intervene, Cale pounced on him, grabbing Ben's right arm and wrenching it at an unnatural angle. The crack echoed through the gym. Ben's scream followed immediately. "Medical team to the training floor," the supervisor called frantically into his radio. Cale stood over Ben, breathing heavily, a strange, almost serene smile on his mouth. "Sorry," he said, without a trace of remorse. "Accident." That evening, I sought out Dr. Finch in his lab. He looked up from his microscope with visible irritation when I entered. "Thorne, this is outside your scheduled testing window." "It's about Cale," I said, closing the door behind me. "Something's wrong with him." He sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose before removing his glasses. "If you're referring to the training incident, accidents happen, especially with enhanced strength. We push the limits here." "It wasn't an accident," I insisted. "You've seen how he's changing. The aggression, the physical distortion, his eyes. He's not himself. What I see, Elias, is exceptional adaptation to the serum." He cut me off, his voice sharp with finality. "Cale's metrics are precisely what this project aims to achieve. And his behavior, the way he isolates himself, the single-minded focus, that's desired too. Ether alpha reshapes the neural pathways for optimal predatory response." Dr. Finch studied me for a long, unsettling moment. "Are you concerned about Cale's well-being, Thorne, or are you perhaps struggling with the fact that he is outperforming you?" His accusation stung. "This isn't about competition, Doctor. It's about sanity and safety, isn't it?" he retorted, turning back to his microscope. "You were special forces, accustomed to being the best. Now you're not. You're simply one of the test subjects. I'll note your concerns, but I suggest you focus on your own progress rather than undermining a teammate's success." I left the lab more unsettled than when I'd entered. That night, unable to sleep, I decided to check on Ben Carter in the medical wing. The facility was eerily quiet during night hours, my footsteps echoing down the concrete corridors. As I passed the main laboratory, a movement caught my eye. The door was ajar, a thin line of light showing in the hallway. I approached cautiously and peered inside. Cale Novak stood with his back to the door, hunched over one of the medical refrigeration units. At first, I thought he might be stealing medication, perhaps painkillers. But then he turned slightly, and I saw what was in his hand. Not a blood bag, not a medication vial, but a specialized IV pouch labeled Bionutrient Assimilation Formula Type G. He was drinking from it, gulping down the viscous, dark liquid with an almost desperate primal thirst. I must have made some sound, because his head snapped toward me with inhuman quickness. A dark, viscous liquid, almost like congealed blood but not quite, dripped from the corner of his mouth. His completely black eyes, devoid of any visible iris, fixed on mine. For a second, neither of us moved. "Need it?" he rasped, his voice rough, animalistic. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, smearing the dark fluid across his cheek. "You will too, eventually." He pushed past me into the corridor, his presence overwhelming, leaving the empty nutrient bag crumpled on the counter. The next morning, I found Jarek Vance alone in the cafeteria, shoveling an almost obscene amount of food onto his tray. Our enhanced metabolisms demanded it. He looked up from his breakfast, his eyes shadowed. "You look like hell," he observed as I sat across from him. "I need to talk to you about Cale," I told him. I recounted everything. The sparring incident, Dr. Finch's dismissive attitude, and what I'd witnessed in the lab, the bionutrient assimilation formula. Jarek listened without interrupting, his expression growing steadily more concerned. "Bionutrient drinking," he kept his voice low. "You're sure?" "Saw it with my own eyes, and he said I'd need it too eventually." "What the hell does that mean?" Jarek pushed his tray aside. "I've noticed changes too. Nothing this extreme, not yet, but his behavior in the combat simulations yesterday was..." He trailed off. "What happened?" I pressed. He went off script. Ignored the mission parameters completely. Just went through the simulated enemies one by one, tearing them apart. Could have completed the objective in half the time, but he seemed to be, Jarek struggled for the right word, enjoying it too much, like a wolf among sheep. "Need to tell someone," I insisted. "Finch already shut you down. Richter sees Cale as his star pupil." Jarek ran a hand through his closely cropped hair. "Look, I'll keep an eye on him. Document anything unusual. If we build enough evidence, they'll have to listen." Later that day, the scientists introduced a new combat simulation. A hostage rescue scenario in a complex urban environment. We ran it in pairs, with Cale and Ben taking the first attempt. Ben's arm was still in a cast from the observation room, a grim reminder of Cale's uncontrolled power. David and I watched on monitors as they moved through the scenario. The difference between Ben's methodical, tactical approach and Cale's was stark. Where Ben carefully cleared rooms, Kale burst through walls, attacking the armed hostage-takers with his bare hands rather than the provided simulation weapons. Jesus, Finn O'Malley whispered beside me as Kale literally ripped a mannequin's head from its body. That's not combat, that's butchery. And he's smiling, I added, pointing to the close-up camera feed. Kale's transformed face showed a pure, visceral pleasure as he destroyed everything in his path. When we ran the simulation ourselves, Finn and I completed it with higher efficiency ratings and precision, but lower threat elimination scores than Kale had achieved. You two think too much, General Richter commented during our debrief. Novik acts on pure instinct, that's what we need in the field, unfettered aggression. After dinner, Finn O'Malley caught up with me in the corridor. We need to talk, he said quietly. Not here. We found an empty storage room where the cameras had limited coverage. Something's very wrong with this project, Elias, Finn said once we were alone. Did you see how pale Kale looked at dinner? And his eyes, they're never normal anymore. I tried telling Finch, he thinks I'm jealous of his progress. It's not progress, Finn, it's deterioration. And I'm worried the rest of us aren't far behind. Finn leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. My vision's been changing. At night, I can see heat signatures, and I'm hungry all the time, no matter how much I eat. A different kind of hunger. That could just be the serum's effects, I said, though I'd experienced similar, subtler shifts. Maybe, but what if it's the start of whatever's happening to Kale? Our conversation was interrupted by the facility-wide announcement system. Dr. Finch's voice echoed through the corridors, crisp and authoritative. All Project Chimera participants report to the main laboratory immediately. When we arrived, Ben and Kale were already there. Ben stood stiffly, his casted arm held protectively. Kale paced restlessly, his movements jerky, unnatural. Jerk Vance arrived moments after us, his expression guarded, his eyes fixed on the 5 syringes arranged on the tray before Dr. Finch and General Richter. The amber liquid inside was darker than our previous injections, with a reddish tint that hadn't been present before. Gentlemen, Dr. Finch began, his voice barely containing a triumphant edge, your progress has exceeded expectations. Based on your adaptation rates, we're accelerating the timeline. Starting tonight, you'll receive increased dosages of an enhanced formulation of the ether strain, ether beta. Jerk Vance stepped forward. Ma'am, sir, with respect, shouldn't we complete more stability testing before increasing dosage? Some of us are experiencing side effects that— Your concerns are noted, Captain, General Richter interrupted, his voice laced with thinly veiled impatience. Dr. Finch's team has analyzed all data and determined this is the appropriate next step. But sir, Jerk persisted, the physiological changes are accelerating faster than projected. Perhaps we should. Are you questioning direct orders, Captain? Richter's voice became a harsh, cutting whip. Jerk stiffened, his jaw tight. No, sir. Good, because this project is too important for cold feet. Richter gestured to the syringes. Dr. Finch, proceed. One by one, we received our injections. The pain was immediate and infinitely more intense than before. A burning sensation that felt like molten lead pouring through my veins, consuming me from the inside out. I gripped the medical chair, knuckles white, as my vision blurred. Through the haze of pain, I saw Kale receiving his injection. Unlike the rest of us, fighting to remain composed, to simply survive the agony, he seemed to welcome the burning. His face relaxed, an expression almost like pleasure contorting his features. He was reveling in it, that night. As my body adjusted to the increased dosage, sleep was an impossible dream. My skin felt too tight, stretched thin over newly expanded muscles. My senses were overwhelmingly sharp, a constant assault. The soft hum of the ventilation system sounded like jet engines. I could smell everyone in the nearby rooms, their sweat, their breath, their blood. I got up to get water from the small sink in my quarters when I heard voices from the corridor. Moving silently to my door, I pressed my ear against it, my enhanced hearing easily picking up the hushed conversation outside. Cannot ignore the assimilation symptoms, General. Dr. Finch's voice was tense, strained. Subject Kale's blood work shows molecular restructuring of brain chemistry consistent with metabolic vampirism. And the cellular indicators for consciousness assimilation are off the charts. Novik is adapting exactly as intended, Doctor, Richter replied dismissively. The thirst for bionutrients, the absorption of others' capabilities, was not in the project parameters as an uncontrolled primary effect. Finch's voice dropped lower, desperate. The side effects are escalating. If Washington knew, Washington wants results, doctor, not excuses. Their assimilation can be managed and eventually eliminated in future iterations or channeled for specific operational purposes. But the combat potential we're seeing in Subject Kale is exactly what they're paying for. Their footsteps moved away, leaving me frozen by the door. Metabolic vampirism, consciousness assimilation, addiction. I kept thinking about these words, connecting them with the image of Kale drinking from that specialized nutrient bag, remembering the way he'd smiled after brutalizing Ben the next morning. I approached the others at breakfast, determined to share what I'd overheard. Jerk and Finn listened intently, their expressions growing more concerned with each horrifying detail. Ben Carter, however, shook his head in disbelief. "You're making this up," he accused, his casted arm cradled protectively against his chest. "Kale's just adapting better than the rest of us. You can't handle that, he's the best." "This isn't about who's best, Ben," I insisted, my voice tight with frustration. "Something's happening to him, to all of us. The ether strain isn't stable. They're turning him into something inhuman." "Elias is right," Finn added, his face pale. "Haven't you noticed the changes, the mood swings, the unnerving hunger, the new urges?" "All I see is Elias trying to sabotage Kale because he can't keep up," Ben retorted, standing abruptly, grabbing his tray. "I'm going to train with someone who isn't spreading paranoid fantasies." As Ben walked away, Jerk sighed heavily. "He won't listen. He and Kale were close before all this, like brothers." "Kale's getting worse," I said. "Who knows what the increased dosage will do to him, to all of us." "All of us," Finn corrected quietly, pushing away his half-eaten breakfast. "I haven't told anyone, not even you, but I've been having dreams, violent ones. I wake up wanting to hunt, to absorb, to consume, not just blood, Elias, something else, something intangible." We fell silent as Kale entered the cafeteria. He filled a tray with triple portions, then sat alone in the corner. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor, the veins beneath it dark and prominent. As he ate rapidly and systematically, his black, dilated eyes constantly scanned the room, like a predator assessing prey. The atmosphere in the facility had changed completely. What had begun with friendship and shared purpose now seemed dangerous, terrifying. 5 men, changing into something else entirely. Scientists pushing boundaries without concern for consequences. And at the center of it all, Kale Novak, General Richter's star subject, becoming something less human, something more monstrous with each passing day. And underneath it all, a terrible certainty was growing in my mind. This was only the beginning of our nightmare. 3 weeks after I'd caught Kale Novak consuming the bionutrient formula, the memory haunted me every night as I lay awake, listening for movement in the corridors. The terrible certainty that we were headed toward disaster grew stronger each day. Kale continued to deteriorate before our eyes, his humanity slipping away in small, terrifying increments that the scientists either couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge. General Richter announced a combat readiness test for that morning. The obstacle course had been modified with automated opponents' combat drones programmed to simulate enemy combatants. We gathered at the entrance in our tactical gear, checking our weapons, loaded with non-lethal training rounds. Kale arrived last. The changes in him were shocking. His body was grotesquely distorted, veins pulsed visibly beneath his grayish, almost leathery skin. His muscles had continued to grow disproportionately, straining against his uniform. But his eyes bothered me most. Completely black now, with no visible iris, they constantly scanned, never blinking. "Everyone clear on the objective?" Jerk Vance asked, maintaining his leadership role despite the palpable tension in the air. "We neutralize all targets and extract the intelligence package from the central building." "Simple enough," Ben Carter nodded eagerly, though his movements were still stiff from his injury. Finn O'Malley caught my eye with a worried look. We both noticed how Kale kept staring at Jerk's throat as he spoke, an almost hungry gleam in his black eyes. "Let's establish positions," Jerk continued. "Kale, you take point. Ben, back him up. Elias and Finn take the flanks. Keep radio contact at all times." Copy that," I replied, grateful to be positioned away from Kale. General Richter watched from the observation deck above, Dr. Finch at his side, her tablet clutched tightly. "Begin on my mark," Richter's voice announced through the speakers. 3, 2, 1, execute. We entered the course at a run. It was designed like a small village, with prefabricated buildings, narrow alleyways, and strategic choke points. The automated opponents, metallic humanoid figures on treaded bases, patrolled with sensor arrays that would register our presence. For the first 15 minutes, everything proceeded according to plan. Kale moved with frightening efficiency, disabling drones before they could even register his presence, a blur of motion. I took out 3 targets on my assigned route, surprised at how easily I anticipated their movements, how time seemed to slow when I aimed. Central building secured. Ben Carter's voice crackled over the radio, strained but clear. Moving to extract the package. Copy that, Ben, Jerk responded. Elia's Finn converge on the central building to provide. The radio erupted with screaming, not the controlled shouting of combat but primal, agonized shrieks. The sound of a man dying in excruciating pain. Jerk, Ben, report, what's happening? I called into my radio. Only more screaming answered than a wet, gurgling sound that turned my blood cold. Elia's. East side, Finn O'Malley's voice was tense but controlled. I'm approaching from the west. I sprinted toward the central building, vaulting a concrete barrier with unnatural ease. The door had been ripped from its hinges, metal twisted like paper. Inside, the lights flickered erratically. The screaming had stopped. I moved silently through the entrance hall, weapon raised, every enhanced sense screaming danger. A wet tearing sound came from the main room ahead. Rounding the corner, I froze at the scene before me. Jerk Vance lay on his back, eyes open and empty, his throat a mangled cavity. Cale Novak straddled him, hands and face covered in gore. He wasn't just killing Jerk. He was consuming him, tearing chunks from his neck and shoulders with teeth that had elongated into points, designed for tearing flesh. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost savoring. He was feeding Cale. Ben Carter's shout came from the other side of the room. He stood with his weapon raised, trembling. "Stop! What the hell are you doing?" Cale's head snapped up, his face barely recognizable beneath the mask of gore. He moved with blinding speed, crossing the room before Ben could even fire. One hand gripped Ben's weapon, crushing the barrel with a sickening crunch. The other seized his neck. "No," Ben managed, before Cale twisted with a sickening crack. Ben's body crumpled to the floor. Lifeless Cale turned toward me, his black eyes finding mine. Dark, viscous fluid dripped from his mouth as his lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. "Hungry," he rasped, his voice no longer human. "So hungry, Elias, they filled me with substance, but I need more." He took a step forward. "Your essence smells right." Movement in my peripheral vision. Finn O'Malley had arrived at the other entrance, taking in the carnage with wide, horrified eyes. "Elias," he whispered, his voice thin with terror. "We need to go, now." Cale's head swiveled toward Finn's voice. In that split second of distraction, I fired 3 rounds into his chest. The impacts barely staggered him. "Run!" I shouted to Finn, turning to flee down the corridor. Finn followed close behind. "Emergency protocol," he gasped. Buttoned by the main entrance, we sprinted through the maze of hallways. Behind us, Cale roared, a sound no human throat should produce. The walls shook with the force of his pursuit. We reached the entrance, slamming our hands against the emergency button. Sirens wailed as steel barriers began descending from the ceiling. "Security team, code red, I shouted into my radio, my voice raw. "Cale Novak has gone hostile. Jerk Vance and Ben Carter are down. Repeat, Jerk and Ben are dead." The radio crackled with static. "Copy that. Containment protocol initiated." Gas deployment in progress. White vapor began pouring from vents in the ceiling. We backed away from the sealed entrance as the sound of Cale's approach grew louder, concrete cracking under his monstrous footsteps, metal bending as he tore through obstacles. "This way," a security officer called frantically from a side door. "Evacuation route," we stumbled through, gasping as the door sealed behind us. Through a reinforced window, I watched the corridor fill with gas. Cale burst into view, moving on all fours now, his movements animalistic. The gas swirled around him as he sniffed the air, black eyes finding us through the window. He slammed against it, the impact spiderwebbing the supposedly unbreakable glass. "It's not holding him," Finn whispered in horror. Another impact. The crack spread, the security team arrived, firing tranquilizer rounds. Cale roared in fury, turning to face this new threat. The darts stuck in his gray, leathery skin like porcupine quills. 1, 2, 6, a dozen. He staggered, swinging wildly at his attackers, catching one man with a blow that sent him flying across the room, striking the wall with a sickening thud. Finally, Cale's movement slowed. He dropped to his knees, then fell forward, his transformed body twitching as the sedatives overwhelmed even his enhanced system. Jesus Christ, someone whispered behind me. General Richter pushed through the gathered security personnel, his face pale as he surveyed the scene through the window. Get him to containment, he ordered, pointing at Kale's unconscious body. Maximum security protocols, and get a cleanup team to the testing area. Dr. Finch appeared at his side, her professional composure cracked for the first time since I'd known her. General, I warned you about the molecular instability. The consciousness assimilation was a documented risk factor in Alpha's preliminary trials. Not now, Doctor, Richter snapped. He turned to us. Thorne, O'Malley. Medical bay immediately. Sir Jerk and Ben are dead, I said, my voice shaking with rage and shock. Kale killed them. He was consuming Jerk. This whole project is a disaster. We need to shut it down. Need to follow orders, soldier. Richter cut me off, his cold eyes holding no grief, only calculation. Medical now. Guards escorted us to the medical bay, my mind racing with images I knew would never leave me. Jerk's vacant eyes, Ben's neck snapping, Kale's blood-covered face with those pointed, tearing teeth. Dr. Finch entered shortly after. She approached us with 2 syringes. What is that? Finn demanded, backing away, his enhanced senses detecting something off about the liquid. A sedative, she replied evenly. You've experienced severe trauma. Your enhanced physiologies require specialized medication. No more injections, I said firmly. No more serums. This ends now. Her expression hardened. This isn't optional, Thorne. She nodded to the guards who moved to restrain us. I considered fighting. With my enhanced strength, I could probably overpower them. But then what? We were miles from civilization in the Canadian Arctic wilderness. Even with our capabilities, escape seemed utterly impossible. The needle slid into my arm. Darkness crowded the edges of my vision almost immediately. You should have listened, I murmured as consciousness faded. Now we're all monsters. I dreamed of an endless river of shadow, flowing through sterile corridors. Kale Novik, his body twisting into something inhuman, swam through it, not just a physical form but a predatory idea. Jerk and Ben floated face down, their bodies hollowed out, their essence gone. 3 days passed before I awoke fully. My head pounded as I tried to sit up, finding myself strapped to the bed, thick, reinforced bonds securing my wrists and ankles. These, unlike the previous restraints, might actually hold someone with my strength. Easy, Elias, Finn O'Malley's voice came from nearby. I turned to see him in a similar bed, though his restraints had been removed. They've been keeping us sedated. Jerk and Ben, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Dead. Finn's face was haggard, eyes haunted. They told me yesterday when I woke up. They're calling it a psychological break triggered by the alpha strain, a tragic training accident. I struggled against my restraints. And Kale, contained, that's all they'll say. The door opened, and General Richter entered, flanked by Dr. Finch and 2 armed guards. Release him, Richter ordered, gesturing to my restraints. Once I was free, Richter pulled up a chair between our beds. I'll be direct. What happened was unfortunate, but not entirely unexpected. Every breakthrough has casualties. The casual dismissal of Jerk and Ben's deaths ignited a cold fury within me. Casualties. Kale tore them apart. He was consuming them. A severe adverse reaction to the original ether alpha formula, Dr. Finch interjected, not meeting my eyes. The alpha strain contained molecular elements that triggered predatory responses in Kale's brain chemistry. The protein binding was unstable. The metabolic vampirism and consciousness assimilation were unforeseen primary effects. And you knew this was possible, I accused, my voice low and dangerous. I heard you talking about it weeks ago, about metabolic vampirism and absorption. Richter's expression hardened. Every military advancement carries risk, Thorne. The atomic bomb killed its share of scientists during development. So what now? Finn asked quietly, his voice laced with resignation. You quarantine us until we start consuming people too? No, Richter leaned forward, his voice chillingly calm. Project Chimera continues. With modifications, Dr. Finch has developed ether beta, an improved formula that eliminates the unfortunate side effects Kale experienced while harnessing the underlying mechanisms. I stared at him in disbelief. You can't be serious. After what happened, deadly serious, Thorne. The project is too valuable to abandon. Ether beta uses a different molecular binding agent that prevents the neural deterioration of the frontal lobe while maintaining enhanced physical capabilities. It also ensures the assimilative properties are fully controllable. And if we refuse, I challenged. Richter's smile didn't reach his eyes. That's not an option. You signed the consent forms. The military has invested millions in your development, and now, with 3 subjects lost, you and O'Malley are even more valuable. Lost. Finn's voice rose, a raw edge of grief. Jerk and Ben were murdered by Kale. By what your serum turned him into. A tragedy, Richter agreed without a trace of sincerity. But Kale's reaction was extreme, an outlier. The data from his case has proven invaluable in refining the formula. His degradation provided critical insights into the assimilation process. It showed us what not to do. I looked to Dr. Finch, searching for any sign of human decency. Doctor, you can't continue this. You've seen what the serum does. Something flickered in her eyes, doubt, perhaps even guilt, before her clinical mask returned. Ether beta is fundamentally different, Thorn. We've corrected the flaws. The assimilated traits will be channeled, focused instead of uncontrolled. When? Finn asked, resignation heavy in his voice. Tomorrow morning, Richter replied, standing. The facility is now under elevated security. Military police have been stationed at all exits. All communications are restricted. This is for your protection as much as operational security. After they left, Finn and I sat in silence for several minutes. We're prisoners, I finally said. Finn nodded. We always were, we just didn't know it. I don't trust this ether beta. Even if it works better, they're still experimenting on us. Do we have a choice? I looked at the reinforced door, the cameras in each corner of the room. Not right now. The next morning, we were escorted to the main laboratory. The facility had changed overnight. Armed military police stood at every junction, their faces grim beneath their helmets. The research staff avoided eye contact as we passed, moving quickly through the halls. In the lab, Dr. Finch waited with 2 syringes containing a clearer liquid than the murky amber ether alpha. Ether beta represents a complete redesign, she explained as technicians prepared our arms. The binding agent prevents neural deterioration while enhancing physical capabilities beyond what ether alpha achieved. It also ensures the transference of traits is directed and controlled. Will it make us want to assimilate people? I asked bluntly, using her own chilling terminology. Her jaw tightened. No. The protein structure that triggered the uncontrolled predatory response has been eliminated. Now the hunger is for specific biosignatures. It's a targeted acquisition. And Kale? Finn asked, his voice strained. What happens to him? A shadow crossed her face, a fleeting moment of something akin to pity. Subject Kale is providing valuable data for future iterations. His degradation continues to inform our understanding. The injection hurt worse than the first. My veins turned to fire, muscles spasming so violently the restraints barely held. I bit through my lip, trying not to scream. Beside me, Finn convulsed, blood trickling from his nose. When the pain finally subsided, hours had passed. Unlike the rush of euphoria that followed ether alpha, ether beta left me feeling hollow, like my insides had been scooped out and replaced with something cold and foreign. A void where my true self had been. Over the next 3 days, the changes became apparent. My strength doubled compared to alpha. I could bend steel with my bare hands. I could run at speeds approaching 60 miles per hour. My senses sharpened even further. I could hear conversations 3 rooms away, see in near total darkness. But the hunger remained different. No primal craving for flesh, no predatory impulses toward others, just a constant, gnawing emptiness that food couldn't satisfy. It felt like a missing piece, a targeted void. 1 week after receiving ether beta, I convinced a guard to let me see Kale Novick. I need closure, I insisted, to understand what happened to my friends. The guard hesitated, then escorted me to a reinforced door in the facility's lowest level. 5 minutes, he said, swiping his key card. Doctor's orders. The observation room overlooked a steel-walled chamber. In the center, strapped to a reinforced table with thick titanium restraints, lay what had once been Kale Novick. I barely recognized him. His skin had turned completely gray, almost leathery. Muscles bulged unnaturally beneath it, distorted and overdeveloped. His jaw had elongated to accommodate teeth that no longer fit in a human mouth, sharp, pointed things designed for tearing flesh, not just eating. His fingers had extended into clawed appendages that constantly flexed against their restraints, desperate for release. 2 scientists in hazmat suits extracted samples, blood, tissue, spinal fluid, from his restrained body. Kale's black eyes followed their movements like a predator, even in his diminished state. When one scientist moved closer to adjust an IV, Kale lunged against his restraints with such force the entire table shuddered. Incredible adaptation rate, a technician murmured beside me, making notes on a tablet. Complete physiological restructuring to optimize predation. His genetic markers suggest a complete resequencing for the targeted assimilation of specific biosignatures. An astounding, if uncontrolled, success. Was my friend, I said quietly, a tremor in my voice. The technician glanced at me, then back at his tablet. That was Subject Kale, the most successful Ether Alpha recipient in terms of physical enhancement. The psychological deterioration is unfortunate, but informative. Through the glass, Kale's head suddenly turned. His black eyes found mine with uncanny precision, despite the one-way mirror. A horrific, stretched smile spread across his inhuman face, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. Elias, he mouthed the word, clear despite the thick barrier between us. Soon you too, I stumbled back, chilled to the bone. Fascinating, the technician noted. He still recognizes former team members. I left without another word. The image of Kale, that monstrous thing on the table, burned into my mind. It wasn't my teammate anymore. It was something else entirely, something created by human arrogance and military ambition. And the most terrifying thought of all, with ether beta coursing through my veins, how long until I became something just as inhuman? Something designed for a specific, horrifying purpose. That night, I lay awake in my quarters, staring at the ceiling. Down the hall, I could hear Finn O'Malley pacing restlessly in his room. Neither of us had spoken much since seeing what remained of Kale. The weight of our situation pressed down on us. We had become something more than human, but at what cost? Jerk and Ben were dead. Kale had transformed into a creature out of nightmares, a husk drained of all that made him human, yet still alive. And we continued changing day by day under the watchful eyes of scientists who viewed us not as men, but as experiments. Dr. Finch's words echoed in my mind. Ether beta is fundamentally different. Maybe she was right. Maybe we wouldn't develop the uncontrolled hunger that had consumed Kale. But as I felt the cold, calculated power running through my enhanced body, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had crossed a line, a threshold humanity was never meant to cross. We were tools, weapons, and our very existence was proof of a monstrous success 6 weeks past in a blur of testing and adaptation. The hollow feeling from ether beta never fully disappeared, but my body transformed in ways that made even my previous enhancements seem trivial. I could now bend steel as easily as folding paper and run at speeds approaching 60 miles per hour without breaking a sweat. And my senses had sharpened to nearly supernatural levels. I could hear conversations 3 rooms away, see in near total darkness, and detect the individual biosignatures of everyone in the facility. Finn O'Malley experienced similar changes. We trained together daily, pushing boundaries that shouldn't have been possible for human beings to cross. Through it all, we spoke little about what had happened, about Jerk and Ben, about the terrifying thing Kale had become. Our silence was an unspoken agreement: survive now, process later. The results are extraordinary, General Richter announced during our morning briefing, reviewing our latest test metrics with poorly concealed satisfaction. Ether beta has surpassed all performance projections without the complications of the original formula. Dr. Finch stood beside him, dark circles shadowed her eyes, and a new nervous tic had developed. She constantly checked the security monitors visible from the briefing room. The molecular stability remains consistent, she reported, her voice flat and clinical. No signs of neural deterioration or aggressive impulse enhancement in either subject. The hunger mechanism has been successfully rerouted for targeted acquisition. Subject, not soldier, not person. The dehumanization was subtle but deliberate. What about Kale? I asked, interrupting their self-congratulation. Any changes in his condition? Richter's jaw tightened. Subject Kale's status is not your concern, Thorne. Killed my friends, I said, meeting his cold stare. I think that makes it my concern. After a tense silence, Dr. Finch sighed. Subject Kale's condition continues to progress along expected lines. The biological samples we've collected are proving invaluable for understanding the ether alpha deterioration process. We're learning how to avoid unnecessary consumption. You're still harvesting parts of him, Finn said, disgust evident in his voice. Even though he's basically not human anymore, that's enough, O'Malley. Richter snapped. You both have a new assignment. Report to equipment in 30 minutes. After they left, Finn turned to me. They're going to keep us here forever, aren't they? Lab rats until we either die or turn into whatever Kale is becoming. I nodded, keeping my voice low. Unless we find a way out. The armed escorts arrived precisely on time, leading us to the equipment room where tactical gear awaited. The briefing was simple. Infiltrate a mock terrorist compound constructed about 100 miles from the main facility. Neutralize all opposition forces, played by military personnel with simulation weapons, and extract a case containing intelligence materials. This will be your first field test beyond the facility boundary, Richter explained, spreading a topographical map on the table. The compound is here in this valley. Under normal circumstances, it would require a full squad, nearly 2 days to reach the location and complete the objective. He looked up, studying us with calculating eyes. I expect you to complete it in under 12 hours. The trek to the target location would have been grueling for normal humans: rugged mountain terrain, dense forest, and steep ravines under the harsh Arctic elements. For us, it was almost effortless. Finn and I moved through the wilderness with supernatural speed and agility, covering ground that should have taken days in mere hours. This still feels wrong, Finn said as we paused on a ridge overlooking the mock compound. The facility below consisted of several prefabricated buildings arranged in a defensive perimeter, with armed personnel patrolling the grounds. These abilities, they're not meant for humans to have. I studied the compound through binoculars, mapping patrol patterns and identifying entry points. Too late to worry about that now, Finn. We are what they made us. And what exactly is that? Finn asked quietly. Because sometimes I catch myself thinking like a predator. I watch people move and I see targets prey. Not for blood, for something else, something vital. He looked at his hands, flexing them. The primal bloodlust may not be there, Elias, but something far more insidious is taking its place. I feel a desire to acquire, to integrate their unique biosignatures. I lowered the binoculars, unable to admit I had felt the same chilling shifts within myself. Let's just get this done and get back. One problem at a time. We infiltrated the compound with ease. The soldiers playing opposition forces never stood a chance. Their movements seemed painfully slow to our enhanced perception, their tactics predictable and ineffective. We neutralized 23 hostiles in under 7 minutes, moving through the compound like ghosts. No bullets, no weapons beyond our hands and bodies, just quick, precise strikes that rendered men unconscious before they realized we were there. I located the intelligence package in a reinforced safe that I tore open like cardboard. Inside was a metal briefcase containing nothing but a note from General Richter. Test complete. Return to base. The entire exercise had taken less than 4 hours from deployment to completion. We made the return journey in silence, both processing the implications of what we had become. By any military standard, we were the perfect weapons, faster, stronger, and more lethal than any normal human could hope to match. And there were only 2 of us. What would an army of enhanced soldiers like us mean for warfare? 3 days later, we approached the facility perimeter in the pre-dawn light. Something felt wrong immediately. The security checkpoint at the main entrance stood abandoned, its windows shattered and door hanging ajar. Stay alert, I whispered to Finn, though I didn't need to. His posture had already changed to combat readiness, eyes scanning for threats. We entered the checkpoint cautiously. Blood spattered the walls and pooled on the floor, already dry and darkening. No bodies, just the evidence of violence. The security monitors displayed static, and the communication system remained silent despite my attempts to contact the main facility. Emergency power, Finn noted, pointing to the red auxiliary lights that cast the corridor in a bloody glow. Something triggered the lockdown protocol. We both knew what, or who, that something likely was. The main entrance required both key card and biometric authentication. With the systems compromised, I had to force the doors open, metal groaning as I pried them apart with my enhanced strength. Beyond lay a nightmare. The corridors of the facility had become a slaughterhouse. Bloody handprints marked walls where people had tried to flee. Spent shell casings littered the floor near defensive positions that had proved useless. And the bodies, or what remained of them, the first researcher we found lay sprawled in the corridor leading to the laboratories, his chest cavity torn open and emptied. Not just killed, but consumed. The second and third we discovered in similar states in the adjacent offices. None had bullet wounds, Whatever killed them had used claws and teeth and had left behind the grisly evidence of absorption. Kale, Finn whispered, his face pale despite his enhanced constitution. He's doing it again, assimilating. Need to find any survivors, I said, though my tone suggested I didn't expect any. The control room door had been ripped from its hinges and thrown across the room. Inside, the command center had been destroyed, monitors smashed, equipment crushed, and in the center of it all, Dr. Finch and General Richter, or what was left of them. Richter lay face up, his chest and abdomen torn apart, rib cage splayed open like wings. Dr. Finch's body had been positioned beside him, her head twisted at an impossible angle, eyes open in a final expression of terror. Unlike the others, they hadn't just been killed for sustenance. The arrangement of their bodies suggested something more deliberate, almost ritualistic. Jesus, Finn breathed. He didn't just kill them, he wanted them to suffer. He wanted to take their very being. I moved to the single intact monitor, still displaying feeds from the facility's security cameras. The system automatically archived footage, and I rewound to see what had happened. The recording showed Kale in his containment cell, strapped to the reinforced table as usual. Two scientists in hazmat suits were extracting samples when something changed in Kale's demeanor. He went completely still, then began straining against his restraints with renewed, terrifying purpose. The titanium bands designed to hold him began to bend, then snap one by one. The scientists backed away, hitting emergency buttons, but it was too late. Kale tore free, his movements inhumanly fast. He seized the first scientist, ripping through the hazmat suit to tear out the man's throat and then feeding. The second tried to flee, but Kale pounced with animal speed, dragging him down. What followed was too graphic to watch without turning away, but I forced myself to witness it. Kale fed on both men, not just blood, but something else, something vital growing stronger with each gruesome acquisition. Then he looked directly at the camera, smiled with blood-stained teeth, and moved with chilling purpose toward the exit. The subsequent footage showed his methodical hunt through the facility. He didn't just kill, he stalked, ambushed, and toyed with his prey. The security teams fired hundreds of rounds with little effect. Tranquilizer darts bounced off his gray, leathery skin. He moved through their defenses like they weren't there, his body now completely transformed from anything human. The last clip showed him cornering Dr. Finch and General Richter in the control room. Their deaths had not been quick. He's still here, Finn whispered, reading my thoughts. And now he's hunting us. A soft thump from the ventilation duct above us confirmed his words. Something large moved through the air system, metal groaning under its weight. We need to get out, I said, backing toward the door. Now we sprinted down the corridor toward the nearest exit, but a crash from ahead stopped us. A vent cover flew across the hallway, bent and twisted, followed by a shape that dropped to the floor in a predatory crouch. I barely recognized what had once been Kale Novak. His body had transformed completely. Gray, leathery skin stretched over hugely enlarged muscles, elongated limbs ending in clawed hands, and a face that had restructured itself for efficient feeding. His jaw extended forward, filled with pointed teeth arranged in multiple rows. The only human feature that remained were his eyes, still completely black, but now filled with a malevolent, chilling intelligence. Elias, the creature rasped, its voice a distorted, guttural version of Kale's. Finn, brothers, finally Kale, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. This isn't you, it's the serum, they did this. He tilted his head, studying us like curious specimens. No, this is me, true you. Soon, he inhaled deeply, a guttural sound. I smell it in your blood, different but same. Beneath, just sleeping, been waiting, making ready. Need you both to complete. Complete what? Finn asked, positioning himself slightly in front of me. Kale smiled, a horrific stretching of his transformed face. The becoming your essence, his essence, my essence, all together. He lunged with blinding speed. Finn shoved me aside with enhanced strength, placing himself in Kale's path. I crashed into the wall as Kale collided with Finn, both of them tumbling to the floor in a blur of movement. Finn fought with everything Ether Beta had given him, strength, speed, combat instincts, but Kale had transformed beyond even our enhancements. His clawed hands tore through Finn's tactical gear and into flesh, ripping and tearing with each strike. Run, Finn shouted, blood spraying from his mouth as Kale's teeth sank into his shoulder. Elias hesitated for one terrible second, torn between helping my last teammate and the certainty that we both would die if I stayed. Then training and survival instinct took over. I turned and ran, using every ounce of my enhanced speed. Behind me, Finn's screams turned to wet gurgling sounds, then Silence Eye raced through the facility's corridors, sealing emergency doors behind me. Each barrier might buy me seconds, nothing more. I needed to get out, to escape before Kale finished with Finn and came for me. As I rounded the corner to the east exit, I caught a glimpse of movement in the reflection of a shattered glass panel. Kale moved along the ceiling, his transformed body clinging to the surface like an insect, pursuing me with a single-minded, terrifying purpose. I crashed through the emergency exit into the Alaskan dawn. The cold air shocked my lungs. The perimeter fence stood ahead, 12 feet of reinforced steel topped with razor wire, nothing to an enhanced soldier. I cleared it in a single bound, landing in the snow beyond. A roar echoed from the facility behind me, rage and hunger mixed in an inhuman sound that carried across the frozen landscape. I didn't look back. I ran, pushing my enhanced body to its limits, knowing that what pursued me was no longer my teammate or even a man. The facility had become a slaughterhouse. Everyone was dead: researchers, security, General Richter, Dr. Finch, and now Finn. I was the only survivor, carrying in my veins the same substance that had turned Kale into a monster, a predator of essences, and also carrying Finn's final desperate surge of biosignatures. Absorbed in that horrifying moment, metal groaned under tremendous pressure as I sealed the final emergency bulkhead. Kale's inhuman roar echoed through the ventilation system, making the overhead lights flicker. I'd managed to lure him to the lower levels by activating emergency protocols throughout different sections of the facility, creating a maze that even his predatory instincts couldn't navigate quickly enough. Containment Protocol Alpha 7 engaged, announced the automated system as steel barriers descended from the ceiling. Biohazard quarantine active. The pounding started immediately. Kale slammed against the reinforced doors with such force that the wall shuddered. Each impact sounded louder than the last. "Hold," I whispered to the barrier. "Just hold." I didn't have much time. Everyone in the facility was dead. The image of Finn's final moments flashed in my mind. His blood spraying across the corridor wall as Kale tore into him, and the chilling sensation of Finn's own unique capabilities, his perception, his analytical mind, briefly transferring to me in that moment of terror. I pushed the memory away. Grief would have to wait. Moving quickly through the blood-splattered corridors, I headed for the main laboratory. The room had been destroyed in Kale's rampage, but the secure storage units remained intact. I broke open the biometric lock with a single punch, tearing through metal that would have been impenetrable to normal human strength. Inside, I found what I needed: vials of ether alpha and ether beta, labeled tissue samples, and hard drives containing research data. I stuffed everything into a backpack. In Dr. Finch's office, I found her personal tablet, still logged into the system. It contained video logs of the entire project, from subject selection to the final, horrifying transformation of Kale. I added it to my collection. A particularly violent crash echoed through the facility, followed by the blaring of alarms. Warning: containment breach detected in Sector 4. Initiating secondary containment protocols. Kale was breaking through the facility had been designed to contain biohazards, not super soldiers turned monsters. I needed to move faster. In the security office, I downloaded surveillance footage onto portable drives, capturing everything from our arrival months ago to Kale's escape and subsequent massacre. The evidence in my backpack was damning proof of military experimentation gone horribly wrong. Another crash, closer this time. The ventilation ducts above me creaked as something heavy moved through them. I grabbed my backpack and ran for the emergency exit on the east side of the facility, the one furthest from Kale's last known position. The exit required a key card I didn't have, so I simply tore the door from its frame. Cold Arctic air hit me forcefully as I stepped outside. The facility had been built into the side of a mountain, surrounded by wilderness in all directions. The nearest town was over 100 miles away. Behind me, another alarm sounded. Kale had broken through another containment level. I didn't look back as I sprinted into the forest, my enhanced body moving at speeds no normal human could match. Even with my advantages, Kale would be faster, stronger, and now, likely more cunning, having absorbed qualities from Jerk and Ben. My only hope was distance and the continued functioning of the remaining containment barriers. The Canadian Arctic wilderness in winter was extremely dangerous. Temperatures dropped to -30, snow lay thick on the ground, and predators roamed freely. An ordinary person wouldn't survive. For me, it was helpful. The harsh conditions might slow even Cale if he managed to escape. I ran through the first day without stopping, putting miles between myself and the facility. My enhanced physiology burned energy at an alarming rate, but I couldn't stop. Each time I considered resting, I remembered the sound of Cale moving through the ventilation ducts, the wet tearing sound as he fed on Finn, and the strange, chilling sensation of Finn's detailed analytical mind momentarily merging with my own. By the second day, hunger and exhaustion began to affect even my enhanced body. I'd crossed mountains, forded half-frozen rivers, and navigated dense forests. The backpack containing the evidence felt heavier with each step. I forced myself to keep moving, using trees for support when my legs threatened to give out. As night fell on the second day, I finally collapsed against the trunk of a massive pine, my body having reached its limit. I pulled the backpack close, protecting the evidence even as I passed out. In the distance, I heard the rhythmic thumping of helicopter rotors, but couldn't tell if it was real or hallucination before I blacked out. I awoke to bright lights and the sterile smell of a medical facility. Restraints secured my wrists and ankles to the bed, thick, reinforced bonds that might actually hold someone with my strength. An IV dripped clear fluid into my arm, and monitoring equipment surrounded the bed. Men in military uniforms stood guard by the door. "He's awake," one of them spoke into a radio. "Get the general." "Where am I?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Where's my backpack?" Neither guard answered, their faces impassive behind mirrored sunglasses. Minutes passed in intense silence before the door opened, admitting a doctor in a white coat, followed by a stern-faced man with silver hair and a chest full of medals. "Sergeant Thorne," the older man said, pulling up a chair beside my bed. "I'm General Marcus Hamilton. You've caused quite a situation." The doctor checked my vitals with clinical efficiency, drawing yet another vial of blood from my arm. I'd been poked and prodded so many times over the past months that the needle barely registered. "The facility," I said, struggling against the restraints. "There's a creature there, Cale Novick. He killed everyone." Hamilton's expression didn't change. "We've sent a team to assess the situation. The facility has been secured." He leaned forward, hands clasped. "What I need from you now is a full account of what happened." I told him everything. The ether-alpha injections, Cale's deterioration, the massacre, my escape, and the chilling truth of his consumption. As I spoke, I watched their reactions closely. The doctor occasionally glanced at Hamilton, who maintained a perfect poker face throughout. "And the others?" I asked when I finished. "Jerk Vance, Ben Carter, Finn O'Malley." "Training accident," Hamilton replied smoothly. "A regrettable loss of life during a classified military exercise." I was shocked by the dismissal. "Training accident, that's the story you're going in with." They were torn apart. The serum turned Cale into a monster, and he slaughtered them. Hamilton signaled to the doctor, who quietly left the room. Once the door closed, the general's demeanor changed, becoming cold and calculating. "Sergeant, let me be perfectly clear about your situation. Project Chimera was a classified military operation at the highest level. The events you described, while unfortunate, fall under national security protocols. People need to know what happened, what the military was doing, creating super soldiers that turn into monsters that consume others. The evidence in your backpack has been confiscated and secured," Hamilton finished for me. "As have you. For weeks, they kept me in isolation. Different doctors conducted tests daily, blood draws, muscle biopsies, stress tests to measure my enhanced capabilities. They never used names, referring to me only as the subject during their clinical discussions. They ignored my protests, my demands to speak to anyone outside the facility. I was a prisoner in all but name, kept alive only because my body contained valuable military secrets. My blood, now infused with the perfected ether beta, held the key to their ultimate weapon one morning, about 3 weeks after my rescue. 2 MPs escorted me to a conference room where General Hamilton waited with several officials in suits. "Sit down, Thorne," Hamilton gestured to an empty chair across from him. "We need to discuss your future." I remained standing. "Am I under arrest?" "That depends entirely on you," one of the suits replied. "I'm Richard Bentley, Department of Defense. We've reviewed your statement regarding Project Chimera, and it presents a significant problem." "And?" I asked. and it presents a significant problem, Bentley repeated, sliding a folder across the table. Inside, you'll find two options. I opened the folder. The first document was an honorable discharge with full benefits and a sizable lump sum payment. The second was a sealed indictment for treason. Your choice is simple, Hamilton said. Accept the discharge, sign the non-disclosure agreements, and walk away with a medal for classified service to your country. Or attempt to pursue this matter further, in which case we'll prosecute you for treason, espionage, and theft of classified materials. That's not a choice, I said. That's blackmail, that's national security, Bentley corrected. Project Chimera represented billions in military research. The technology in your blood could completely transform warfare. The perfected ether beta allows for controlled, targeted biosignature acquisition. It's the ultimate strategic asset. It turned my friend into a monster that ate people, Hamilton shrugged. An unfortunate outcome with that particular subject. The project continues, with improvements based on the data collected. The beta strain, as you are a living testament, has eliminated the uncontrolled consumption. Now it's selective. Focused, I stared at him in disbelief. You're continuing the program after everything that happened, with modifications, Hamilton said casually. Your adaptation to ether beta proved remarkably stable. In fact, your blood samples have provided invaluable insights for the next phase. You are, in essence, the perfect template for our next generation of operatives. I suddenly realized they weren't just continuing the program. They were using me to improve it. Every blood draw, every test had been designed to refine their monster-making process, to create controlled predators capable of assimilating specific threats. What happened to Cale? I asked, a fresh wave of dread washing over me. Hamilton and Bentley briefly looked at each other. Subject Cale has been contained, Hamilton said carefully. His biosignatures are still interesting. That's all you need to know. I looked down at the folder again, at the two documents representing my future. I could fight. Try to expose what had happened, what they were continuing to do. But who would believe me? How far would I get before they stopped me? And what would they do with me then? My blood was their prize, my being their perfected weapon. I picked up the pen and signed the discharge papers. Hamilton smiled thinly. Wise choice, Thorne. You'll receive your medal in a private ceremony tomorrow. After that, you're free to go, provided you maintain absolute silence regarding Project Chimera. And if I don't, I asked, then treason will be the least of your concerns, Bentley said quietly. The next day, they pinned a nameless medal to my chest in a room with no witnesses, shook my hand for photos that would never be published, and drove me to the nearest civilian airport, with instructions never to contact anyone associated with the military again. At 31, I was a free man with a secret that would kill me if I shared it, and a horrifying truth deep within my own changing biology. The years blurred together after that. I moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough to form connections. Cincinnati, Phoenix, Detroit, Portland. I never considered these cities my home, just temporary staging points. I worked jobs that required extreme physical labor: construction, warehouse work, remote security, anything that would exhaust my enhanced body enough to allow a few hours of uneasy sleep. I avoided doctors, hospitals, and anyone who might notice that I wasn't aging normally. The ether beta strain had changed me at a cellular level. At 40, I looked 35, despite the stress and nightmares that should have aged me faster. My wounds healed too quickly. Illnesses barely affected me, and I never got tired like normal people did. I lived invisibly, leaving no trace, forming no bonds, a ghost haunted by the truth of his own transformation. The nightmares followed me everywhere. Cale's black eyes finding mine through the glass, his inhuman voice rasping my name, the wet sound of tearing flesh as he fed on Finn, and the horrifying, alien sensation of Finn's fading consciousness briefly merging with my own. Some nights I woke up screaming, my enhanced strength destroying whatever furniture was unfortunate enough to be within reach. 5 years after the incident, I found work at a remote processing plant in Nebraska, a place that dealt with specialized biological waste. The owner didn't ask questions when I gave him my fake ID, just nodded at my build and put him on the processing floor. The work was brutal and clinical, perfect for someone seeking physical exhaustion to silence the mind. One evening, as the shift ended, I was hosing a viscous, reddish biofluid from the concrete floor when something changed inside me. The metallic, organic smell hit my nostrils differently than before, triggering a response I'd never felt. Annoying hunger, but it wasn't for food. It was a cold, intellectual craving. My vision sharpened, focusing on the crimson stream swirling down the drain. Without thinking, I dropped to my knees and plunged my hands into the thick, warm fluid. The urge to bring it to my mouth to absorb its residual biosignatures was overwhelming, a compulsion beyond rational thought. I fought it, digging my nails into my palms until they bled, using pain to keep myself focused to maintain control. Thorn, my supervisor's voice broke the trance. You sick or something? I staggered to my feet, struggling to appear normal. Yeah, just lightheaded, must be the heat. That night I packed my few belongings and left town, terrified by what had happened. It wasn't just the hunger. It was the recognition. I had seen that same look in Cale's eyes weeks before he broke. The episodes grew more frequent over the years, triggered by the sight or smell of specific biomaterials, a unique genetic marker, or even a fleeting, powerful surge of energy from another living being. Any exposure could set it off. Each time, the hunger grew stronger, harder to resist. By the 10th year after Project Chimera, I had isolated myself completely. I lived on the outskirts of cities, working night shifts to avoid people, shopping at odd hours. I kept my freezer stocked with specific, raw, nutrient-dense meats, discovering that consuming them bloody helped take the edge off the deeper, more complex cravings, a craving not for mere sustenance, but for something more. The dreams evolved too. Now Cale spoke to me through them, calling me brother, telling me it was only a matter of time. You were always the perfect one, Elias, his distorted voice would whisper. The beta, it completes you. It's what you were made for. I would wake sweating, feeling my teeth with my tongue, afraid they might have sharpened during the night. In year 15, during a particularly bad episode triggered by a rare, powerful biosignature I detected in a crowd after a car accident, I caught my reflection in a window. For a split second, my eyes had darkened, not fully black like Cale's had become, but a deep, unsettling obsidian that couldn't be explained by lighting. The sight terrified me more than anything else. Physical proof that the transformation, the final, chilling purpose had begun. I started keeping records then, dates and durations of the hunger episodes, triggers, physical changes I observed. The pattern was undeniable. The cravings were becoming more frequent, more intense. What had once been manageable through sheer willpower now required days of recovery. Each episode left me weaker against the next, my humanity eroding with every passing moment. By year 17, I knew I was running out of time. The hunger was almost constant now, a background presence even on good days. I lived on raw meat and kept physical distance from anyone whose unique essence or biosignature might tempt me. Some nights I would chain myself to the bed, not trusting what I might do while unconscious. The irony wasn't lost on me. The military had created a monster in their quest for the perfect soldier, the ultimate infiltrator and assimilator, and now I was becoming exactly what I'd feared and fought against. Cale's words returned to me night after night in my dreams. True me, true you, soon. I sat in my latest apartment, a sparse one-bedroom in Chicago, examining my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My eyes had definitely changed, the irises darkening in a way that couldn't be explained by lighting. My teeth remained normal, but for how much longer? I gradually made my decision, then became certain. If I couldn't stop what was happening to me, I could at least ensure the world knew the truth before I lost control completely. The military was still creating super soldiers, still working on Project Chimera. I'd seen enough news reports about impossible military operations, heard enough whispers on underground forums, to know it hadn't died with General Richter. I owed it to Jerk, to Ben, to Finn, and even to the man Cale had once been, to expose what had been done to us. And to stop it, that night, I set up my laptop and began typing. My name is Elias Thorne. What I'm about to share will sound impossible, but I swear every word is true. Before I become something I can't control, something they designed me to be, I need to expose what the government has done, what they turned us into. The confession was only the beginning. Now I had to find proof. Proof that the program continued, and if possible, stop it before more controlled monsters like the one I was becoming were unleashed. I had to face the chilling reality that I was changing, becoming the perfect hunter, engineered to seek and absorb unique human traits. Each passing day brought me closer to the creature I'd spent 17 years running from. I could feel the hunger even now, a constant presence at the edge of my awareness, waiting for a moment of weakness. Time was running out. What chilling truth would you expose if time were running out for you? Tell me in the comments.